Welcome back to the Deep Dive. So today, we are looking at the world through a lens that, well, I'll be honest, it made me a little uncomfortable when I first started reading through the stack.
I think that's a pretty common reaction.
Yeah. I mean, usually when we try to figure out why the world feels different, why companies are run differently, why public debate feels so fragile, even why religion seems to be changing.
Right.
We look at economics.
Full of money.
Or we look at politics. But the stack of notes and articles we have today, it suggests there's an invisible engine underneath all of that. Yeah. Something we're completely ignoring.
And it's the one lens we're most afraid to touch.
It really is. It feels like the third rail of modern conversation.
It does.
The lens is gender. But hold on, before everyone just hits pause, this isn't about the culture war of the week. We are not talking about pronouns or bathrooms here.
No, it's much deeper, much older. It's a fascinating, and I'll admit, a somewhat provocative set of materials.
It really is.
The core argument here is that, while we're all busy debating left-wing versus right-wing politics, the actual tectonic shift, the thing really changing our lives, is this massive swing between what the sources call masculine societal patterns and feminine societal patterns.
Yeah, that's reshaping everything.
Everything. From how your CEO runs a meeting to how an AI chatbot talks to your kids, all the way to how we worship in church.
That's a huge claim.
Yeah.
So to navigate this without, getting into trouble, we need to do some serious housekeeping right at the top. The sources are very, very specific about the terms.
Yes.
When this invisible engine text talks about masculine and feminine, they aren't just talking about men and women.
That is the most critical distinction. If you miss this, you miss the entire point of the deep dive.
Okay.
The sources draw a very clear line between the biological, so male and female, and the archetypal. So when we use the word masculine today, we're referring to a very specific set of values, behaviors, and cultural qualities. In your notes, it's called the left set.
And feminine refers to the right set.
Precisely. And a biological man can operate with those right set values. He can be nurturing, consensus-driven, risk-averse.
And a biological woman can be the opposite.
Exactly. She can operate with left set values, be competitive, hierarchical, totally results-obsessed. But, and this is the key, historically and broadly, across thousands of years of evolution, these patterns tend to track with gender. So we're talking about software, not just hardware.
Okay, I like that analogy.
That's
It's the
great.
operating system running in the background.
Yeah.
So let's unpack that software. Let's look at this left set versus right set, because the mind map really does anchor everything else we're going to talk about.
It does.
What exactly is running on the left set operating system?
Okay, so the left set, the masculine archetype, is built for one primary purpose: external adaptation. It's about survival in a hostile world. So you see traits like competence, power, efficiency, achievement, and competition. It's very results-oriented.
So it's the hunter mindset.
Oh.
Or the warrior mindset.
It is. Think of it as the task monitor. The driving questions for the left set are pretty binary. Does this work? Is it true? Did we win? It's a harsh metric.
Yeah.
You either catch the deer or the tribe starves. There's no A for effort in the left set. Competence is basically the only currency that matters.
Okay, so that's the left set. Sharp, hard, effective. Now, compare that to the right set, the feminine pattern.
The right set is the community monitor. Its primary goal isn't external conquest, it's internal cohesion. This set is defined by things like empathy, relationship building, communal welfare, beauty, harmony. The driving questions here are not, did we win, but more like, is everyone okay? Do we feel connected? Is there harmony in the tribe?
So one is focused on the objective reality outside the cave, and the other is focused on the social reality inside the cave.
That's a great way to put it. And the big aha moment from the source material, especially that invisible engine piece, is that Western society is undergoing this massive unspoken transition.
From one to the other.
A massive swing from a dominance of the left set to a dominance of the right set.
Right. And the sources use a pretty stark term for this process. They call it domestication.
Domestication. Yeah, it's a loaded word.
It is. It sounds like what you do to a wolf to turn it into a golden retriever.
And that's essentially the analogy the sources are drawing. The argument is that society is actively breeding out the aggressive, risk-taking, potentially violent tendencies of the masculine left set.
In favor of what?
In favor of the passive, communal, safe attributes of the feminine right set.
Which, on the surface, sounds great. I mean, who sits around saying, you know what we need? More violence, more aggression? Nobody.
Right. It sounds like progress. It sounds like civilization. But The sources argue that when you apply this to the structural foundations of institutions that were built on the left set, you start to see some very specific and maybe unintended consequences.
You're trading capacity for comfort.
That's the phrase they use.
So let's get specific. Where is this trade-off actually happening? The first place the notes point us to is the corporate world, governance and leadership. I have to say, I would not have thought corporate governance theory would be a gendered topic, but the sources map this out pretty clearly.
It's surprisingly relevant. If you look at the traditional way companies were run, say, 50 years ago, it was based on something called agency theory.
Okay, break that down for us. Agency theory in plain English.
Agency theory is pure left set. It views the company as this rigid contract between the shareholders, the owners, and the managers. The goal is singular: maximize returns.
The bottom line.
It's competitive, it's about financial utility, and it assumes everyone is acting in their own self-interest. It's a very masculine way of seeing the world. Clear hierarchy, clear goal, clear winner. If a factory isn't profitable, you close it. The math makes the decision.
But that's not really the vibe anymore, is it? Not on the Fortune 500. A CEO couldn't go on TV today and say, I don't care about anything but the stock price.
No, they'd get roasted.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because now we have stakeholder theory.
You see it everywhere. And stakeholder theory is the feminine or right set corrective to that. It says, no, it's not just about the shareholders or the math. It's about the employees, the consumers, the environment, the public.
Right.
It prioritizes communal welfare and social cohesion over raw efficiency.
So instead of, did we make a profit, it's, did we take care of the village?
Exactly. The expert notes highlight that this aligns perfectly with the broader cultural shift toward inclusivity, but this then bleeds into how decisions actually get made in the room. The sources contrast authoritarian leadership with participative leadership.
Authoritarian sounds bad, though. It sounds like a dictator.
Well, in a modern context, it really just means command and control. It's efficient. The leader decides. The team executes. Very left set.
Okay.
Participative leadership, on the other hand, that's all about relational management and group consensus. You know, let's go around the room and see how everyone feels about this.
Right.
But here's where it gets really interesting and where the sources identify a trade-off.
What's the trade-off? Because getting everyone's input sounds like a good thing.
In a purely participative, feminine-coded dynamic, the sources argue that the process of inclusion, it becomes more important than the result.
Wait, what?
The fact that everyone felt heard is viewed as a success, even if the decision that was made was mediocre or took 3 weeks to make.
So the meeting being inclusive matters more than whether the strategy actually works.
According to these sources, yes. That's the potential downside. The focus shifts from competition, may the best idea win, even if it hurts some feelings, to cohesion. Let's just make sure nobody feels left out.
It changes the whole metric of success.
It changes it from competence to harmony.
And if you prioritize harmony over everything else, you eventually run into a massive problem with the truth, because the truth isn't always harmonious. Sometimes the truth is ugly.
Bingo. And that brings us to maybe the most controversial part of this deep dive, the conflict between truth and consensus. This section of the notes was pretty heavy.
Yeah, that source title, The Feminized Erosion of Western Institutional Foundations. Just the title is a mouthful. But it argues this shift isn't just changing meetings, it's actually eroding the ability of our big institutions like universities and newspapers to even function.
The argument here is that traditional Western institutions, so academia, journalism, science, the law, they were originally built on that masculine left-set model.
Okay.
The goal was the unfettered pursuit of truth.
And truth requires a fight, right? You have to battle test ideas.
You do. To get to the truth, you need conflict. You need open debate. You need the freedom to fail and the freedom to offend. The sources use this analogy of warriors debating battle tactics.
I saw that.
In that tent, it didn't matter if your feelings were hurt. It didn't matter if the general liked you. All that mattered was whether the strategy would keep the tribe alive. The conflict was task-oriented. It wasn't personal. It was about survival.
But the modern feminine model, it changes the goal. It's not about the battle anymore.
Precisely. The orientation shifts from truth to in-group consensus. The priority becomes maintaining the emotional stability of the group.
So what happens to the truth?
Well, if a fact is true, scientifically or statistically true, but stating it causes emotional distress or disrupts the harmony of the group, the right-set value system dictates that the fact must be suppressed.
This.
Yeah.
This sounds like the exact mechanism behind what we call cancel culture.
Correct. The sources explicitly link cancel culture to feminine conflict resolution. This is a fascinating psychological distinction.
How so?
See, in the masculine model, if we disagree, we yell at each other, maybe we fight, and then we have beer, it's open conflict, it's over quickly.
But the feminine style is different.
The sources describe the feminine style of conflict as involving social exclusion, passive aggression, and reputation destruction. It's not a duel, it's a shunning.
So instead of debating the idea, you exile the person.
Yes, because that person hasn't just been wrong about a fact. They've threatened the cohesion of the group. They made people feel unsafe. So the punishment is exile.
And the sources argue this policing of consensus. It leads to what?
Intellectual stagnation. If you are terrified of being socially exiled, which is a primal fear, by the way, because in the wild, exile meant death, you won't risk saying something that might be true but unpopular.
It creates a spiral of silence. Everyone just nods along because nobody wants to be the one cast out.
Exactly. And speaking of risk, that's another huge area where this left versus right framework applies. The notes talk a lot about the relationship between masculine patterns and risk versus feminine patterns and safety.
This feels fundamental to the economy. I mean, if you don't take risks, you don't get new businesses.
It is fundamental. The masculine left set is associated with high risk-taking, entrepreneurship, the freedom to fail. Failure is just seen as feedback. It's data. You try, you fail, you adjust, you try again. That's the engine of innovation. But the feminine right set is described in the sources as well. Risk-averse.
It favors safety above all else.
Right. The goal of the right set is to eliminate suffering and eliminate risk. The sources suggest this is why we see such a massive increase in government regulations. It's an attempt to wrap the world in bubble wrap.
And this connects to a really fascinating distinction the sources make about compassion. I marked that section the compassion gap.
Yeah.
Because usually we just think compassion is being nice. But the text argues the left set and right set define it differently.
They do. For the left set, compassion is about fairness and justice.
Yeah.
It's about consistent standards. If you break the rule, you face the consequence, and that's how you learn. That's seen as compassionate because it leads to competence. It prepares you for the world.
It's the tough love approach. I'm not helping you because you need to learn to do it yourself.
Yeah. Exactly. Whereas the right set compassion is about removing suffering immediately. It's rule-bending, leniency, ensuring no one feels pain. And while that sounds incredibly kind, and in a family it's often necessary, the sources warn that if you remove all suffering and all risk from society, you also remove the feedback loops that teach people how to survive reality.
You get that domestication we talked about.
You do.
You create a generation that can't handle a scraped knee.
Right.
Or a harsh word.
Or a challenging idea. And there was a really specific modern example of this in the sources. AI chatbots. We have a paper here on bias and fairness in chatbots.
Yeah, I was surprised to see that. How does AI fit into a gender deep dive?
It fits perfectly because AI is the ultimate mirror of our current values. The sources warn that we are designing our artificial intelligence to align almost exclusively with these right set values.
Also,
Chatbots are programmed to prioritize safety, to avoid offense at all costs, and to police bias. They're being trained to prioritize consensus over potentially harmful truths.
so the AI is being domesticated too. It's like a digital HR department.
That is a terrifyingly accurate description, yes. And the danger the sources highlight is the feedback loop. If children are raised interacting with these safety-first, consensus-driven AIs, it alters their worldview.
It restricts their perception of reality.
It does, to only the things that are safe to say. It reinforces those submissive, risk-averse norms from a very young age. It's a technological enforcement of the feminine archetype.
Wow. It's programming the right set values directly into the next generation's brain. Okay, I want to pivot now to a case study that the sources go into surprisingly deep detail on. We've talked about business, tech, but there's a whole section here on the feminization of Christianity.
This is a very stark example of the shift. The church is one of our oldest institutions, so seeing the change there is really telling.
What does the data say?
We have survey data here from the Barna Group. It shows that typical worship attendance in the U.S. is about 61% female.
That's a significant gap. That's almost 2/3.
It is. But beyond just attendance, the data shows that the men who are involved tend to stick to what the sources call logistics.
Logistics.
Yeah, they handle the financial operations, building maintenance, moving chairs, setting up the sound system. But the spiritual nurture, the prayer, the actual heart of the church, that's dominated by women.
Why is that? Is it just that women are more spiritual? Or is the institution itself changing?
The sources argue it's a theological shift. They claim the church has moved from a masculine theology to a feminine one.
What does a masculine theology even look like? I'm picturing crusades, but I assume it's more nuanced than that.
A bit more nuanced. Historically, the sources say the faith was viewed as a battle against darkness, against sin, against the self. It was about risk-taking, self-sacrifice, losing your life to find it.
A challenge.
Yes, it was patterned after the life of Jesus, who was willing to inflict and endure pain for a greater mission. It was an adventure.
And the feminine theology that has replaced it.
That focuses on the right set values we discussed: nurturing, sharing, feelings, comfort, and safety. The sources argue that because the environment has become so saturated with these values, highly masculine men, those high and left set traits, feel like they're in scarce supply.
They feel like they don't fit in the pews.
Exactly. They feel alien in that environment because the church is no longer asking them to be competent warriors or builders. It's asking them to be nice, safe, and communal. If the highest virtue is niceness, the warrior has no role.
So they check out.
They check out. Or they just focus on the spreadsheet and the soundboard because that's the only place they can exercise competence.
It's amazing how consistent this pattern is, whether it's the boardroom, the university, the AI code, or the church. The story the sources are telling is the same: a shift from competence, truth, and risk to empathy, consensus, and safety.
It is the invisible engine. Once you put this lens on, you start to see it everywhere. And the sources point out one final area that I think is really telling: diplomacy.
Oh, right. The article about diplomacy being a feminine art.
Yes. It notes that modern diplomacy has shifted away from that transactional negotiation. I give you this land, you give me that trade route, and toward relationship building. It's about soft power, getting to know the person, nonlinear conversations.
The global scale of stakeholder theory.
Exact.
So, we've unpacked the mind map. We see the shift, left set to right set, competence to cohesion. The big question is, so what? Is this good? Is it bad? Or is it just different?
The sources are cautious, but they are definitely critical. They acknowledge that the right set brings necessary corrections: inclusivity, empathy, care for the vulnerable. Those are objectively good things.
Right. Nobody wants to go back to a Dickensian factory where nobody cares if you lose a finger. That's a nightmare.
Exactly. A purely left set world is brutal. But the invisible engine text warns that we may be overcorrecting.
In what way?
By eroding the foundations of the left set, by demonizing risk, by prioritizing feelings over facts, by replacing the freedom to fail with a guarantee of safety, we might be dismantling the very engine that created Western prosperity and innovation in the first place.
We're trading progress for comfort.
That's the fear. If you domesticate a society too much, you might make it nicer, but you also make it fragile. And fragile societies don't usually handle crises very well.
No.
When a real left-set threat appears, like a war or a pandemic, you need competence, not just consensus.
That is a lot to think about. It's not just about men and women. It's about the values we prioritize as a culture.
It really is. And I think the final provocative thought I'd leave you with, drawing from that invisible engine source, is this. We often talk about safe spaces as a triumph of modern society. We want everyone to feel safe. But if innovation requires risk and truth requires conflict, can a safe space ever really be a creative one? Or are we slowly suffocating our ability to solve problems because we're too afraid to upset the group dynamic?
That is the question for the drive home. Are we domesticating ourselves into decline? Thanks for diving deep with us today. We'll see you next time.